world's hotspot, next hotspot, and where Canada might fit into this. Now, over the weekend, the world, of course, was transfixed on the case of the captain and the crew of that American-flagged freighter. The ship had been seized by Somali pirates, and it was the captain, Richard Phillips, who gave himself up to be hostage to secure the release of the rest of his crew. Well, Navy SEALs and Navy SEAL snipers, rather, took care of that situation yesterday. 3 well-aimed shots at the pirates, and the crisis was over. But at least for now. The question is, what is next? And to discuss that, I'm joined from Washington by Chaz Henry of the U.S. Naval Institute, and from Ottawa by Fen Hampson of the Norman Patterson School for International Studies at Carleton University. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for being here. Chaz, let me start with you. Give me some sense of the scope and the size of the problem of piracy in that part of the world right now.
Well, Tom, it's significant and probably larger than most people anticipate. At this very moment, even after resolution of the Maersk, Alabama situation, there are 16 vessels being held by pirates. On those vessels, 250 crewmen being held hostage. And it's a growing problem. Last year, there were 42 incidents of maritime piracy off of the Somali coast. This year alone, since January, we've experienced 66. And one can create a cause and effect understanding there, probably by virtue of the fact that we know of at least $80 million in ransom that has been paid to hijackers over the past year. And that's led to a business model that has encouraged some people in Somalia with fishing experience and perhaps some militia experience as well, given the violence in that country since the 1990s, to pursue piracy at greater extent.
Fen, that's a very good point, that if you start paying for this and create a business model, you're not actually shutting down the operation, you're giving every excuse for it to expand. But look at, for me, if you could, just for a second, Canada's involvement in this, and tell me, are we being more symbolic or more effective in terms of what we're doing off the Somalian coast?
Well, I think we're contributing to the naval patrol that is taking place in a very wide swath of ocean off the Somali coast. But there's a much bigger problem here, and that is that Somalia is one of the great failed states of the international system. It's one of the poorest countries. There is no government. Anarchy reigns. And it's not surprising that Somalis are going to be taking up to contraband and piracy and other kinds of things that are going to export its problems well beyond its shores.
Well, let me throw this to both of you, because in part the discussion over this weekend and even before this weekend has been, how do we deal with this growing trend of privacy for the very reasons that Fen was talking about? And at least one school of thought says the only way you're going to get this problem under control is to go where the pirates live, and that's not at sea, but that's on land, and that would, of course, require some sort of a land invasion of Somalia. How realistic is that, Chaz? Let me start with you on that point.
Well, the United Nations cleared the way for that sort of path in December of last year when they passed Resolution 1851, which allowed a country to specifically move into Somalia, if necessary, to interdict pirate activity. Now, no one has taken advantage of that, but they created a one-year window. Actually, the resolution allows this during the year 2009. There are 3 key areas in which the pirates are operating. 2 of them are very near the central coast of Somalia. One is also relatively coastal, but inland just a bit farther. Satellite imagery, even through Google Earth, can show where these pirate havens are. We know where some of the vessels that are being held are, as well as the vessels the pirates are using themselves to conduct the pirate activity. And it seems a much more efficient means than trying to patrol a huge piece of ocean with even ships that have come from a variety of navies around the world. As we saw in the incident of the Maersk, Alabama, they knew they were being followed by pirates for 5 days, and I'm sure that they were sharing this information with the combined task force in that time, and vessels weren't able to get to their aid even after multiple attempts and finally a successful boarding by pirates.
Fen, let me throw this to you then. Go right ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if interdiction were that easy, I think it would have happened by now, because this isn't a problem that has surfaced overnight. And I think one of the real challenges is that there's not going to be any great appetite on the part of the United States. Chaz can probably speak to that side of the equation, but on the part of American allies to invade yet another country to deal with a problem that in many ways has much deeper roots. And I don't think there is a magic bullet, whether it's a military one or, for that matter, a political resolution to this problem.
And would your take then be that Canada would be on the sidelines of any sort of operation like that in Somalia?
That would be my guess, and that partly has to do with the history of this country in Somalia. Canadians will recall that Canada did send peacekeeping forces in what was ultimately a failed peacekeeping mission in Somalia in the early 90s, and it was not a happy affair. It created some real problems here domestically with the behavior of some of our troops. And so I don't think there's going to be a stampede, certainly in Canada, to go rushing into Somalia in some kind of military operation. That's not to say, as Chad just alluded to, that some kind of interdiction to go after some of the key bases isn't necessarily off the table. But I don't see Canada playing a great role in that.
Chaz,
I think if we see anything, if we see anything along those lines, I wouldn't call it an invasion. And in fact, here in the U.S., as Finn notes, there are recollections of the incident that is known collectively as Black Hawk Down, the previous U.S. experience in Somalia. But I think that something along the lines of a special operations raid, much more targeted, not without risk, of course, in harming people that perhaps weren't intended to be harmed, but still something more targeted specifically at hurting the economic structure that's supporting the pirates may well be in the offing.
So, I mean, in the 30 seconds we have left, just from the two of you, is there anything that we could look for in the next 6 months to a year that would significantly reduce this problem, or are we just going to have to live with it for a while?
My sense is so long as the business incentive continues and ransoms are being paid, absent a special operations rate of the sort I described, it's going to continue and probably grow.
I think it's going to escalate. We've already seen evidence today that the Somalis are very unhappy about the recapture of that American captain, the killing of some Somalis, and so we're going to see an escalation for sure.
Fenn Hampson of the Norman Patterson School here in Ottawa and Chaz Henry of the Naval Institute in Washington. Thank you both very much for being part of this conversation. I appreciate your time, gentlemen. Thank you. Well, there has been another major development today that will have implications for Canada as well. President Obama has just announced, just a few hours ago, some major easing of the restrictions against Cuba, American restrictions against Cuba. Specifically, Cuban Americans can now travel to Cuba as often as they want, and they can send as much money as they want there. That's a change from what things used to be. And here's how that announcement was phrased by Robert Gibbs, the Obama press secretary at the White House this afternoon.
All who embrace core democratic values long for a Cuba that respects the basic human, political, and economic rights of all of its citizens. President Obama believes the measure he has taken today will help make that goal a reality.